Right, so let's get into our panel discussion as we unpack the day that was, day 2, of course, of the Madlanga Commission. We're joined by crime researcher, Mr. Thabang Bogopa in studio. We also are joined by Nelson Mandela University's Raymond Mhlaba Center for Governance and Leadership Acting Director, Dr. Ongama Mtimka, and legal analyst Kevin Smith. Remember, we're also keen to get your thoughts on the revelations from the Commission and the KZN Police Commissioner today. So send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584 or give us a call on 010-594-6010. Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. What a day. I mean, a list of issues that came up. And so a lot for us to talk about. I do want to start with you, though, Dr. Mtimka, and say, let's talk about the politics here. We knew that at some point there was going to be names that are dropped from the National Assembly. And one could make assumptions of what some of those names would be, but that would be irresponsible, of course. But today, 2 names come forward, National Assembly members of Parliament. It is Diane Kohler-Barnard and Fadil Adams. Were you expecting that? Just from, if you look at the political landscape of this country, were you expecting those were the names that would be dropped and, what that does to perceptions right now?
Yeah. So we immediately jumped to conclusions, many of us, that this refers to ANC politicians who are linked to the criminal underworld that were going to be named as part of General Mkhwanazi's allegations and linked to national politics and KZN. It was quite interesting to hear developments outside that province and the alleged mishandling of intel, especially by MP Adams.
Yeah, and we obviously are going to get into the responses that we got from both MPs because they did actually speak to the channel today, quickly wanting to really put forward their version of events where the KZN Police Commissioner essentially putting forward that they mishandled intelligence. But that's a massive allegation. I wonder, though, Thabang, if you look at those allegations against these 2 particular MPs, if they do speak to the political interference that we've been talking about since July, well, Mkhwanazi much earlier than that, but does this speak to just the extent of it? Does it show the seriousness of it? Are these allegations that really taint the integrity of these 2 leaders?
Thank you, Naledi. I have a different view to a limited effect, of course, that to what extent do we say intelligence ought to be classified? Remember, it's not new information that intelligence/funds have been misused. It's not necessarily classified information. We have intelligence generals who are in prison currently for almost similar issues that were raised by Adams. But then also, we need to also be aware that in Mkhwanazi's evidence in chief, or how he presents his evidence, he's also protecting his side. He's, of course, leading his evidence, but he's protecting his side as he goes. So the fact that cases were opened against him, I think it is democratic. If ever someone feels like they've been offended by another person, they should just open cases. Cases must be investigated. If there's wrongdoing, and then it will be prosecuted. If there's no wrongdoing, a certificate of null prosecution must be issued. It's not something that was supposed to be an issue that's at the forefront for me. And intelligence, what happens when intelligence starts to, I would say, abuse sovereignty or power? Do we just leave it there to say, no, this is intelligence, let's not report it? Because it was reported to a police station. So you cannot, or we should not, reach a situation whereby if I have sensitive information that has happened within intelligence, I cannot go out to report. I must go to the police to report. The police must say, okay, we received your report, this is how we're handling it, and perhaps we are now classifying it. But we must not fall trap of this issue of classifying or over-classification of information. I can give few examples that information that was not supposed to be classified, in my view, was classified. Then it means that someone can kill Thabang when I live here, and then they say, let's classify that information. So we need to allow people to come and report even the wrongdoing within the intelligence. We are not saying that the political task team is perhaps, I would say, immune to wrongdoing. If ever there were some elements of wrongdoing within Mkhwanazi's task team, let those members also take responsibility. Because it does not mean that the fact that they are doing it right. If you remember, we used to have the Katomano issues in KZN, whereby people were just killing people. Of course, at that time, we thought they were doing it right. So we are saying, let's allow people to report all the wrongdoing to the state. Let the state do what it can, possibly to say, this, of course, it meets the elements of crime as Mkhwanazi mentioned. If it does not, it's fine. Let's close the case as undetected or decline prosecution. Issue a certificate to that effect. That's what the law expects. But to discourage people from reporting certain matters under the ambiguity that they are classified, I think is not right.
So actually, let's unpack what legally some of the people that were named could have done and if laws were broken. Because what we heard today was General Mkhwanazi saying, for instance, Diane Barnard broke the law by disseminating information that should be classified, saying that Fadil Adams should not have been in possession of the information that he had and should actually have handed that over to a particular portfolio. But were laws broken? What he does is he speaks of the National Strategic Intelligence Act. What were the options that these two leaders would have had that would satisfy Mkhwanazi, for instance's, fears that laws were broken?
Thank you. I'll take you specifically to Mkhwanazi's testimony as it relates to Fadil Adams, and particularly in that scenario where chain of possession was the issue. Regardless of the status of the evidence in his possession or regardless of the classification thereof, it wasn't meant to be in his possession and should have been handed over at that point to the relevant oversight committee. Now, at the point when he refuses to do that, omits to do that, or neglects to do that, that is where the breach occurs. Because again, when we are dealing with intelligence information, it is a prohibitive exercise in its nature, because we don't know if any particular leader or any particular individual could, as they've said, disseminate that information, and then it becomes dangerous. So we have to look at how the law relates to the chain of possession thereof, and Fadil Adams, being a member of parliament, was aware of the fact that the chain of evidence should have then been passed over to the relevant oversight committee. And those are parliamentary rules, and they are held within the constitution as well. So in that particular instance, the breach starts with the possession thereof, and then what happens when you are in possession thereof. Because like Mkhwanazi rightfully pointed out, it's not just what happens when you understand what it is that you're in possession of or its classification or status. It's the understanding of knowing that the chain of possession then needs to go to the relevant bodies.
So this afternoon, as we spoke to these two MPs on the channel, I'm just going to quickly give you a quick roundup of what it is that they said. Diane Barnard essentially said, this information that I dispersed was already in the public domain. There was nothing new here that I was doing. She goes further to say that the rules around what I can disseminate only matter if I am within a committee at that period. I was not part of that joint committee on intelligence. So I wonder what you make of that. Fadil Adams says the information was slid under my door. So there was no person that, looked him in the eye, he says, and handed this information over to him. I don't know what you make of those explanations.
And he says he actually forwarded it to the police, if I remember correctly. So two things about it for me. First of all, the intentions behind what Mkhwanazi is doing. Maybe let me come to this issue of protecting his people. So far, those counter-arguments that have come around that narrative haven't really, in my view, come with anything of credence that says who has done what that is being protected. That's one. Secondly, people questioning his intentions have also not come with information that is outside of professional mistakes that suggest bad or ill intent. So these MPs have come out and defended themselves. And for me, I don't know whether he's casting the net wider in terms of who is involved in this, or in fact, he's just had to cite other people outside of core ANC functionaries in order to say this goes wider than the normal the usual suspects.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot to look at. In fact, Another standout moment from General Mkhwanazi's testimony today is, you might remember this, he talked about two factions within IDAC, that unit within the NPA that is tasked at looking at matters of corruption. Two factions, he says, those that are doing good and those that are halting the good work of the unit. We'll unpack that as well on the other side of this. Stay with us. Welcome back. We continue to unpack day 2 of the Madlanga Commission. Moments that stood out for you in what was once again a bombshell sitting of that inquiry. We're taking your calls on 010-594-6010. Skhumbuzo is in Emalahleni. Skhumbuzo, good evening. Thank you so much for calling.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, go ahead. Talk to us.
I'm having a problem with this issue of what is happening in South Africa. Corruption in South Africa is too much. So when you look what Mkhwanazi said, firstly, I want to take the part of the Senzo Meyiwa issue. General Sibia was mentioned in the case of Senzo Meyiwa that he was the first person who arrived in a crime scene. There, what happened? He arrived in the crime scene. What happened there? So then you made sure that there's no evidence that is going to be found by the police when they're going to investigate it. Now look what is happening about General Sibia. Okay, let me go back to the AMP, Diana Kokla, and Panata, who have been accused too. You don't go to the media and defend yourself. Just say one thing. I'm going to the commission and defend myself about this issue. Going back about the issue of Nhlanhla.
Yeah.
And Nhlanhla, you go back to Nhlanhla. Even then, the president sealed everything about people who donated to him.
Okay.
Nhlanhla is there. And when you found Nhlanhla being protected, you found that it's being protected even to the president. And the intelligence, the president took the intelligence to his office. To do what?
Okay.
To protect whosoever is on his side or on his faction. So then there's a lot in South Africa.
Yeah, Skhumbuzo, thank you so much. And this is the thing, is that you look at it from various angles and you see different things depending on which way you're looking at what we're hearing from General Mkhwanazi. Let's take a look at a few WhatsApps from our viewers. We'll bring those up on the screen now. Saxon says his testimony translates that the involvement of politicians in police matters has totally collapsed the entire SAPS. Saxon, thank you for that. Zongezile says, I do not think that General Mkhwanazi is aware that he's setting himself up too. His testimony is more emotional than factual, lacking focus and desperate. He's beginning to accuse or implicate everyone trying to be relevant, deals with matters all over the country and not in KwaZulu-Natal. Okay, Zongezile, interesting. Piri in Alex says it sounds like the entire justice system is corrupt to the core, from police to judges, lawyers and politicians. The system is on the brink of collapse. No wonder we're not able to achieve real economic development. All right, one more. Victor says, so with regards to Mkhwanazi's testimony, I think he's made a strong case with evidentiary proof. It's up to those named to come and rebut what Mkhwanazi presented. Let's continue with this analysis. And I did bring up the issue of IDAC just before we went into the break, and perhaps Thabang, I'll give that to you. You know, Zongezile says, well, you know, but now there's going to be some questions as well around what it is that Mkhwanazi puts forward to the commission. General Mkhwanazi speaking of factions within IDAC. He says there's a faction that really wants to get to the bottom of the prosecutions that, for instance, come from the political killings task team, and another faction that is simply there to stop that progress. What do you make of that, Mohammed?
You know, my view is that IDAC it's scorpions brought through the back door, but they are starting on a wrong foot because they were just formalized in 2024, just last year. And you know, Advocate Shamila Badoy mentioned this somewhere early in this year to say there's so much infiltration in the NPA. But then I think the presidency called her to correct her to say, can you please make another media statement to put it correctly? What am I saying? Remember, all the outcomes of the Madlanga Commission are no longer the mandate of any law enforcement agency but IDAC. Now, that's the catch, to say, if the president or any politician has interest in any political case, they could simply direct it to a judicial commission or a commission. From the commission, it no longer goes to any law enforcement, because part of the mandate of IDAC is that they can now recruit their own criminal investigators. So it's similar to what Scorpion used to do. If we want you, Naledi, even if you didn't do it, we will come with all the evidence. We can place you on the scene. Remember, in terms of prosecutorial discretion from the NPA Act, there was supposed to be that discretion to say the investigation is sufficient or there's no prima facie evidence against Dr. Mkhwanazi. Or you say, no, but we do agree Thabang has done it, but the offense is not this particular offense. What Thabang has done is maybe this other offense. Now, with IDAC is simply going to be Scorpion again, because simply all the outcomes of Madlanga Commission are now tacitly by law the mandate of IDAC, because that's what they formulated them for, to say you are now responsible for all special cases, serious offenses that include all recommendations that emerge from commissions of inquiries. You should go and check that. So tacitly, everything that we are doing here is going to IDAC, which is why Mkhwanazi is very skeptical around IDAC, because in the IDAC, you are going to find people who were ready to suppress some of these cases. They're just waiting for you to go up and down. They are going to suppress the cases. Or if it goes to the other faction, which Mkhwanazi speaks about, that they are pro or for justice. Remember, the president had to suspend one of the most famous prosecutors who was in Gauteng. Now, if you still have some of the prosecutors who were working with that advocate or that prosecutor, they are going to make sure that some of these matters do not see their day in court. Yeah,
Kevin, I'm going to bring this one to you, because you, again, as part of that testimony today, accusing some prosecutors of asking for a lot before they take cases to trial. I mean, it's quite the big allegation. And then the issue of IDAC. Just as a legal professional as well, I wonder if you get the sense that, oh yeah, this is definitely true. This is something that is known, that is seen. And maybe you even offer solutions on how you crack down on prosecutors that essentially are supposed to see cases to some sense of justice, having the power to decide, no, I'm just simply not going to.
Look, I think on that issue, you can speak to any legal officer, any attorney, any advocate. We've all experienced it, where there are cases that should be prosecuted that don't get prosecuted. As it was just stated, when there's prima facie evidence, something should happen. And prima facie evidence means that it's at face value. So the merits do not have to be complete. The matter shouldn't be prosecuted beforehand, but is there a case to be answered for? And what we tend to find is that because the SAPS have the initial burden of investigation, which the NPA then has to review and decide whether they have the appetite to prosecute these issues, there's that discretion that tends to then taint a lot of cases. And that discretion lies particularly with the NPA. Now, those types of issues are dealt with within the NPA Act, within the judicial system as it is. But what is important to note is that these things are manipulated by individuals. And when individuals are given a lot of authority over the discretionary powers that they are given, that's where we tend to find these omissions and these blind spots. So it isn't necessarily a reform within the judiciary that's needed, but what is needed is a reform within the practice, where the people who fill these positions need to be reformed. We need to audit who are the professionals filling these positions and make sure that they are there to fulfill their civic duties, and they are not just there as a means to an end, because the infiltration that is being spoken about are infiltration of individuals. And because these individuals have an intimate knowledge of the system, they know exactly how to manipulate it. And that's essentially what Mkhwanazi has been saying ever since his initial conference that he held, is that we are witnessing at this time a state of capture where people are so intimately involved at all levels that they have been able to manipulate the system to the advantage of specific individuals, specific ministers, and specific members of the deep state.
Yeah, you know, I think about how the general also talked about a 360 million rand police contract, right? That he alleges that Northwest businessman, a Mr. Karim, being asked by Vusmuzi Madlanga allegedly to intervene and speak to the minister to ensure that a police contract is not cancelled. I mean, just that's quite the network, right? And a lot of confidence to say, no, you're going to speak to the minister. I wonder if you think what the police minister right now, top of mind for him after hearing that testimony, and certainly yesterday's one, very scathing on the police minister. But these networks of powerful businessmen with these massive contracts with a minister that really hasn't been in that department for a very long time.
Yeah. So two things I'd like to say about the role of senior political and administrative leadership in this. Second issue is around what colleagues are talking about. But it's interesting how ministers would fail in the core leadership of the business of the entities that they lead, the core functions of the departments, but be first to be mentioned around matters that they should not be fiddling with, procurement. Because if you have got complex actors, some of them good faith and bad faith, in the organization, within the police and the criminal justice system. And we heard yesterday, General Mkhwanazi talking about the IMC. So if you've got structures like those where there's a potential for cross-departmental leadership that can be effective, the question is, why do these politicians, when there are such factions, they're not able to rein in and provide effective leadership to make sure that the police, the various departments are able to focus on the core business of doing what they are there to do. And that talks to me to poor leadership. If even the senior managers in those departments are not able to actually lead through the murky waters of factions and counter-factions, we know, for example, Samuel Patoy did raise issues about people that need to be fired within the system that are stifling the work. You do need people who actually can take such or make such recommendations and follow through from them so that the people who are not taking action can be exposed.
Let me stay with you, Dr. Mdimka, just as we talk politics a little bit, and we'll step out slightly away, not too far, because the MK party, as well as former President Jacob Zuma, are heading to court today, arguing that this commission, again, is a waste of taxpayers' money. You know, my colleague Vuyomvoko also letting us know that just outside of the venue of the commission, a dozen or so MK party supporters there with placards as well. What do you make of that? The insistence on the MK party that this needs to stop?
Yeah, no, I think that the MK party cannot be trusted to be acting in the best interest of South Africans here. I think they are more anxious about how far these revelations can go in exposing the legacy impact of the days of the president's keepers. That's just what I'm thinking. I don't think that they're acting in the best interests of of South Africans in that sense.
Yeah. Can we go to this issue, of course, around the dockets, really at the center of all of this, Thabang? General Mkhwanazi saying that 5 out of the 121 dockets were ready, ready to just be affected and be seen to have an arrest affected. At what point and Kevin talking about role players knowing where the weak points are and individuals that know exactly where to have those blockages. I mean, is there a sort of trail of how things would have moved that says these 5 dockets, despite how ready they are to see arrests affected, simply just didn't get there?
Yeah, Naledi, we have the challenge of overlapping and overarching mandates in the SAPS, which is why now they had to fight to push the dockets outside the legal control or the ambits of Mkhwanazi. Because the case dockets as they were, within 7 days or so, they were supposed to arrest. It is common that immediately after the prosecution has given directives to say, arrest so-and-so, subpoena so-and-so, within 7 days, actually within the first 24 hours of receiving the case dockets, because that's what SAPS have been waiting for. That was a victory for them. I'm telling you, they would have even effected arrest maybe the same day.
Yeah.
Or same night, to say, this is the instruction we've been waiting for. We have worked so much to get this instruction. Now we are ready to go and face these criminals. Now, Lee, I want to make sure this, just public knowledge, that remember, all those participants in the political killing task team are directly the enemies of these killers. So in the bottom of their hearts, I will put it easy like that, they want to see these guys arrested. Because they themselves and their own families, their own lives are no longer safe. You see? Now, when people are playing dice with people's careers and people's safety, there's someone, remember Mkhwanazi, the reason he's pushing so much is because that he knows if these guys go free, he might not see the next day. Remember Mkhwanazi is going on pension soon, in few months. He might forfeit some of the protection that he has, rendering him vulnerable, meaning that instead of enjoying his pension with his kids, he's going to spend so much money in upping his own security.
Yeah,
and he can't afford that.
You make me think about this actually, and when we come back, Kevin's going to help us unpack this. A prominent name also came up today, that of Fiso Ntuli. We know that name as accused number 5 in the Senzo Miwa murder trial. Now, his name came up as well with the allegations by General Mkhwanazi that he was released on bail even after facing charges of 4 murders and other charges of attempted murder. So how did that legally happen? We'll get into that after this. Welcome back. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition, as we reflect on day 2 of the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. Let's take one call quickly. Richard is in Johannesburg. Richard, good evening.
Good evening to you and your listeners today.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling. Talk to us, Richard.
Look, I've been monitoring this Mkhwanazi saga since he broke on the media briefing on the 6th. And there's been a lot of allegations coming from Mkhwanazi. However, today what became extremely evident is that Mkhwanazi is not talking about the criminal charges that these politicians, or the crimes that these politicians have actually broken in terms of the evidence which he says he has. He talks a lot about WhatsApps and who wrote a WhatsApp and what did the WhatsApp say, but he's not talking about the actual crime that the person's committed by writing a WhatsApp. And we can't simply be discussing Mkhwanazi's allegations. He needs to explain to the nation, why has he not charged anyone? You caught somebody doing something, you've got a prima facie evidence against it, he's got these WhatsApps that's coming to light. How come he hasn't got a registered case number? Why hasn't he got some sort of reference or an OB report book? Or why hasn't him or the General of Intelligence, Crime Intelligence, registered cases? And that's the bigger problem right now. He's talking a lot, but there's no crimes that these people have committed that is actually charged them for.
Okay, Richard, thank you so much for that. And again, you know, we need to keep reiterating it, that the allegations made by Mkhwanazi still need to be tested. And that's an important thing. And we'll touch on that towards the end of our discussion. But Kevin, let's get into this issue of Fiso Ntuli, prominently known because he's standing trial for the murder of Senzo Miwa. But we hear about someone who is released on bail of very serious allegations of attempted murder. After that, while out on bail, then charged once again with 4 murders. I mean, it's almost difficult to sort of fathom that this is what's going on. I mean, what you make of that and how things can go so terribly wrong, how far up that then goes.
Yeah, I think one point of clarity we have to start with is that on one of his attempted murder charges, there was a conviction and they were appealing that. So his bail came as a result of an appeal. And we need to understand the functionality of why bail exists in the first place. Bail exists to secure your attendance at court. It exists to ensure that you don't interfere with an ongoing case or interfere with witnesses and things of that nature, and to ensure that no further crimes are being committed. So we can exactly see that being granted this bail has caused the entire rationale of bail to be breached and to be placed in contention in a matter like this. And how a bail could have even been granted and the schedule of offense that he had been convicted on in the first place, and such disclosures would have been made to the court at the time of the bail being applied for. So the bail in its discretion, the court should have allowed its discretion to take over and say, is there a greater danger of this person committing further crimes if he is granted bail? Because they have to weigh up his civic liberty in exchange for him being held in solitude for the time until he gets prosecuted further. And that, of course, not just is breached, but 4 people have now lost their lives allegedly because of such bail being granted. So it's not only that the systems of the legal system have now been tainted. But who then had allowed for this to take place? What discretion did the court use in granting such bail? And such people must be brought forward and they must give answers to this. In addition to that, there was a point that was raised before the break when it comes to political figures. At the end of day one, Mkhwanazi did make mention of the fact that the president should come through as a witness as well. And if we think about how long these allegations stem from, they don't just stem from Senzo Mchunu tenure, but they also stem from Bheki Cele's tenure. There are other ministers that are also implicated, such as Groenewald, because the task teams that have been disbanded were interministerial task teams. So them even being formulated in the first place was at the discretion of such ministers, and their disbanding should have been at their discretion as well. So how much did they know of this prior to it happening, while it was happening, and for its subsistence? All of these ministers and the president should come forward and they should give answers to these questions.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, because then you give me a good segue into us, getting closing thoughts. And Thabang, I want to get this from you. Kevin already saying this is who he feels definitely needs to be called. I think even with today's testimony, the list really starting to get clear of who we need to see testify. Your wish list.
Okay, I would say the first phase should involve Advocate Shamila Patoi. Justice Mkhwanazi, when he went on pension, he made the same public disclosure as Mkhwanazi. Same. The only difference is that he did not have privilege to the information that Mkhwanazi had, because Mkhwanazi was at judiciary level. So if it was public information, it was aired on all media. So let Mkhwanazi come back to say, what did you mean when you made the same public disclosure as Mkhwanazi? And then also General Masemola, of course. Then perhaps the last one would be General Bheki Cele. No, I also want this Inspector General of Intelligence. We are here because someone failed to act. The Inspector General of Intelligence. Who is the person who's heading National Intelligence and State Security Agency? This person was supposed to have made sure that the entire intelligence of the country is running and actually advising the presidency. Before even Mkhwanazi came, the Inspector General should have already tried to handle it, to say, this is what's happening, call back the interministerial committee, as Kevin have mentioned. Let's try to control this as soon as we possibly can, internally, before Mkhwanazi was forced to do a public disclosure.
Ongama, same question, your wish list, but I also want to sit with that point that was made earlier by Richard, because it does need to be looked at. The fact that every now and then you do hear the general say, well, some of that will come to light later. So we have to reiterate that some of these allegations do still need to be tested.
My general concern is the establishment of the truth, and everybody who needs to go there must go there. The ability of nations to secure themselves, both internally and externally, determines their destinies. And I think that it's important that the president and all leaders in the executive find it in themselves to do the right thing here. Otherwise, South Africa's internal security is going to be in fact, it's already severely compromised, and that affects the destiny of this country.
Gentlemen, this has been an enlightening conversation, and I imagine we're going to have quite a few more of these as the Commission, of course, continues to play out. And do make sure that you stay with us right here on Newzroom Afrika, because we will continue bringing you the updates from the Commission. But thank you so much to our guests, crime researcher, Mr. Thabang Bohoba, Nelson Mandela University Raymond Mhlaba Center for Governance and Leadership's Acting Director, Dr. Ongama Mdimka, and of course, our trusted legal analyst, Mr. Kevin Smith. Do stay with us. We've got your headlines at the top of the hour.